The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is day 3 of this 7-day session here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in June 2022. What is Zen practice? In a word, it is about transformation. The most amazing transformation that can happen. Transformation such that even if we're in very difficult circumstances, we are still free from being caught by those circumstances. Human beings seek pleasure. Who wouldn't? Why would we want to have suffering? But the problem is, as we keep reaching for some happiness or happy experiences and try to repel any negative or difficult experiences, we are unwittingly bringing forth to ourselves suffering. Human beings have all kinds of means of trying to find happiness, and most of humanity, unfortunately, goes in a direction that's not going to get there. We seek through, and this is reinforced by society, by advertising, by our interactions with people, Facebook, you name it. Particularly social media is bad about this. If you have this, you'll be happy. If you do that, you'll be happy. If you have the most amazing job in the world, you'll be happy. If you have not only the most amazing job in the world, but also the best location in which to live, the most expensive and coolest house to live in, the most amazing vehicle, most amazing car, family, you name it. We attempt to surround ourselves with possessions under the assumption, and this is reinforced by society, as I said, that that is what is going to make us happy. And then we wonder why we're not happy, or at least happier, or why happiness seems to evade us. We don't have a constant realm of happiness. What's wrong? Supposedly we're doing everything right, at least what we're told is going to make a difference. There was a British man who had everything. He had an apartment in the best section of town, a very fancy apartment in the best section of town. He had a whole gamut of friends who were highly influential and wealthy, as he was as well. And one day or one evening, he left a party just flat. Somehow it just wasn't doing it for him. What was missing? And at the time, there was an ad in the paper advertising a week of ease and relaxation at a Japanese Zen temple. Anyone who has lived in a Japanese Zen temple in Japan will cock an eyebrow at that one. At any rate, he signed up for a week, and I don't know exactly which temple it was in, quite possibly one of the subtemples of Myoshinji. It's hard to know. At any rate, it wasn't a really hardcore teaching temple, which is fine. It was a temple where he did learn how to do meditation, And he had some spare time, which he would spend in the temple garden. And if you've been to Japan and been to the temple gardens, you realize what amazing places they are. Not just places of beauty, but the energy there, developed over centuries of careful, careful attention. In Japan, a gardener in a temple will pluck single leaves off a bush as they're beginning to yellow or die. Grass, when I first went to live in, or not when I went to live, but when I first visited Japan in 1963 on our way to Burma, people were cutting grass with scissors. Now, of course, they cut it with weed whackers, but back then they were cutting them with scissors. And that level of attention and care kind of is imbued in the environment of these temple gardens. As a matter of fact, Roshi Kapleau, when he was in Japan post Second World War, the War Crimes Tribunal, he was a court reporter, and whether it was in Nuremberg or in Tokyo, I'm not sure which, he was actually the head court reporter for those war crimes trials. And on his spare time, he would go and visit the temple gardens and was so struck by the amazing, deeply peaceful, clear, and profound energy in them that it inspired him to learn more about Zen and ultimately to return to Japan and train at a time when it was exceedingly difficult for Japanese people to survive, and for foreigners, it was unheard of that foreigners went to Japan to study Zen. But he did, and he encountered a teacher who was very open to taking on a foreigner. Not all Japanese temples are, even to this day. And the rest is history. This is why we can sit here and speak to all of you, because he did that. At any rate, this British man, as he was spending his week in the temple, on his break times and in the garden, was struck by a Japanese man who was playing the shakuhachi flute, the bamboo flute, in the garden. And he was entranced by this, and to the point where he actually went out and bought himself a bamboo flute. They're not that easy to play, by the way. And got to know this man a little bit. Turned out that the man in question was actually a flute master. And so I can't remember with the British man went back to Japan and started taking lessons from him. But at any rate, eventually he did take lessons from this master and began to really become an accomplished flutist. He then learned of something called Suizen, which translates as blowing Zen, blowing meditation. And he decided that he would try this. And so he went every day for 6 weeks and spent hours, and I'm talking 8-10 hours a day, in these mountains. And there's Japan is a mountainous country, so it was easy to find some space in a mountain, and simply play the shakuhachi. The traditional Suizen monks actually have a kind of a basket arrangement over their head, a woven headgear that covers their face, and it just has slits for their eyes and their mouth so they can actually play. They are intended to be anonymous. So he did this, and his flute master was deeply impressed by how much he had improved in that period of time. Fast forward, and the man is living in British Columbia these days, apparently, teaching flute, and considerably happier than he was when he had all that everybody felt was the most important thing to have in your life and in order to be happy in London. We think that this will make us happy. We think that that'll make us happy. If only, or if only that. And we keep seeking happiness and fulfillment. And it brings us temporary happiness, and it doesn't go past that, and we wonder why. In my own life, I set about to do a number of things. I ended up becoming trained as a graphic designer and worked for some time as a designer of various different things. Once you have that kind of a background, you can do all kinds of design things. And I have designed book covers and various other things. I've also got architectural training and did architectural work, architectural design work, both on my own and in an architectural office. I did interior design work for commercial offices and banks. Had my own business then as well. And the last work I did out and about in the world was designing heating and cooling systems for buildings. Each of those segments of work were fulfilling up to a point. And then the old discomfort set in. It wasn't until, in my case, and this is not necessarily everybody's case by any means, I finally asked Roshi Kapleau to ordain me and became a Buddhist priest. And since then, I have found my square hole for this square peg, kept trying to fit in all the round holes. When we realize that what we're trying to do may or may not bring about lasting happiness, and there's all the possibility that it won't. We all have affinities, and responding to those affinities and embracing those affinities and moving in those directions, we find livelihoods. But there's still something missing. I have a student who is a concert pianist. He's given concerts all over the world and taught in colleges. And still, he was saying to himself, somebody else would get more praise for their performance than he would. Differences in things like that kind of soured any success he did have. And he finally came to Zen. And he's finally beginning to find, through his inner work, that place where he can be happy regardless of circumstances. And this is the thing. Transformation is possible. We can uncover what will bring us lasting happiness. And it's not a thing. It's not necessarily a profession. It is working with our own mind, exploring our own mind and seeing where we are caught. As I said in the beginning, we all seek it outside of ourselves. The right clothing, the right job, the right location, the right vehicles, the right whatever. And still, that odd little ache, that period of ennui, there's not an ongoing, lasting happiness because we are caught in seeking pleasure outside us. If we instead turn our attention to exploring our mind, which is what causes us the problems to begin with, because it's our attitudes, our assumptions that create that discomfort, that suffering. And as you've heard before, one example of this is Jacques Le Sirhan, the man who was pulled into Buchenwald in the Second World War for having been part of a resistance movement in France, and was living in literally a hell realm in that camp. He was blind, and so he was in a barracks that was so crowded with men that the Nazis deemed unfit for humanity. And so you could not move in that barracks without bumping into another human being. And they were ritually starved, and there was violence and the threat of death constant. And people were going berserk from the stress of it. People were dying from the stress of it. People were dying from being brought out and shot with the band playing in the square at the camp. People were being gassed in the quote showers, close quote. All kinds of hell was in that environment, and he finally became so ill he himself was dying. But as you also have heard, he took advantage, in his words, to leave Buchenwald in that time. And that does not mean that he dissociated. He was quite fully aware of what was going on in his body. And that's the thing. He was tuned in to his body. And through that utter presence and openness to the experience of the extreme pain that he was undergoing, he found freedom. Not only did he find freedom, he found joy. And so his life after that in Buchenwald was very different. Very different. And this again underscores how we draw experiences to ourselves. And as we change, we draw different, more positive experiences towards ourselves. His attitude changed. Nothing else changed. He was still in the same environment. But how he perceived it, what he thought he needed in order to be happy, was gone. And suddenly, for him, everything was quite different. Flora Courtois, the American woman who was a student at University of Michigan, when one vacation she was home at her home. I don't remember where exactly she grew up, but at any rate, she was at the University of Michigan, and she had been searching for a truth that was always true, regardless of circumstances. And in 1 second, sitting on her bed, glancing at her desk, as she put it, the world turned on its axis. And from then on, everything was different for her. She found herself free of tension. She would go to class and run home in joyous abandon, she said, take a quick nap, and then be ready to go. She changed her major. She was going for a PhD in psychology, and she went for a master's degree instead, and graduated, ended up getting married and having a son, and working both as a writer, a scientific writer, and also in some psychological research. And one of the things she told me when I visited one of the times was that, and she was sort of urging me to continue on with that research, but she had discovered, she was working with a man, and I don't remember what the exact research was about, but she discovered that when he turned inward, and she noted that by the fact that his eyes quit moving around. When our mind is moving, when we're full of thoughts and ideas, and in some cases escape, our mind, our eyes move. But when we're inwardly absorbed, they don't. And there was something, I can't remember the details anymore. This is quite a while ago at this point. But he actually ended up having some sort of insight during whatever that experiment was. Again, that underscores going inward is where we are going to find our freedom. But, as you've also heard, going inward in search of freedom, you don't search for the freedom. You explore your inner landscape, particularly through the felt sense. And as you continue your meditation, particularly the very, very powerful extended out breath, you will find yourself becoming aware of where you are caught in greed, anger, and delusion. And there is the opportunity in that moment, if you don't try to sidestep it, to become free of whatever aspect of delusion you've opened up to. And it's a long, ongoing process. And in the earlier years, it can be very difficult and sometimes painful, because we all have experiences as we are growing up, or at least I have not yet met someone who didn't, that impact our self-image. We're chastised for something, or somebody gets angry at us for something, or somebody demeans us, and it hurts. And we have an inner reaction to it. So as we do our zazen, we begin to become aware of those moments when we were impacted in negative or painful ways. And then we can tune in, feel the energy that is marked by, tune in long enough that energy can dissipate, which is marked by a sense of release. And of course, when that energy, for example, it may be sadness. Underneath it may be something else, very different, perhaps grief, and underneath that, perhaps anger, oddly enough. And we keep sleuthing and keep uncovering where we are caught in in our own mind. And gradually, 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 we become little by little more free. And how fast this happens depends on a lot of things, but in part, how willing we are to open up and take a good, even painful look at what it is that is sort of buried within. And we don't have to know the circumstances. That is not necessary. I mean, we may already know the circumstances, but it's not necessary to see the circumstance that caused whatever pain that happens to be that's lodged in your body. What is the most important thing is to feel how it feels. Whether there's a heat that comes up that transfers into anger, or would transfer into anger if you didn't stay present with it, or profound sadness or grief that might feel like a stab in the chest. Whatever it is, to open to that and to keep exploring. This mind of ours is phenomenal. It has been described as luminous transparency. It is not something that is fixed in location. It is not something that has a physical body. And in fact, as was pointed out at one point, it can travel anywhere. We can hear a truck backfiring on the highway a little ways away, and suddenly our mind is there. We hear a dog barking in the background, and suddenly our mind is there. It has no fixed abode. It is not our brain. So what is it? And what happened to it? What happens to it after we die? And who is it that owns this mind? Or is there somebody that owns this mind? These are all very, very important questions. Keep exploring. As Gordy Bruin said after he had a Kensho many, many, many years ago at Rochester Zen Center during a sesshin, in which he was very clearly, deeply focused. Afterwards, he said, "Why didn't somebody tell me? It's about exploring your own mind." It's the last place we look. We try to avoid feeling when it doesn't feel good. And we try to find pleasure in things outside of ourselves, which can never, ever give us lasting happiness. Things come, things go. And even if they don't go, we get bored with them, tired of them, and want something new and different. And this is what brought me to be willing to do Zen practice, as difficult and painful as it was initially for me, was having a very deep and clear recognition that there was nothing outside me that could give me lasting happiness. And that is the case for all of us. No possession, no environment, no friends, family, connections. Nothing is going to give us lasting happiness. And there's always the threat of it being taken away, losing it, whether that's conscious or not. But there is something that will And that is found through the exploration of your own mind, and deeply enough that you could recognize the truth of that mind, who and what we really are. In a word, our Buddha nature, or what some religions call God. I leave you with this. It's up to each one of us if we want happiness, if we want to escape suffering. And that doesn't mean that our karma won't bring us to, for example, get in a car accident or lose a job or other kinds of things that overtly would lead to suffering. But whether they lead to suffering or not will depend on our own mind and how free we are from attachment to having to have things in a certain way. It's up to each one of us. And we all have the capacity to become free. We have the tools to work in that direction. We have the guidance. The only thing that is necessary is for us to walk the path. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.